All right, everybody, welcome to our panel 3C on zombies. I'm going to introduce our four panelists, and then they are each going to talk for about 15 minutes, and then we should have ample time for Q&A. So our first speaker is J.D. Sivert, whose paper is called Consumptions versus Offerings, Zombie on Stage and Screen. J.D. is a first-year PhD student in theater and performance arts program at the University of Georgia. Welcome to graduate school, friend. He is a playwright and performer who worked primarily in Maryland before his recent move to Athens, Georgia, and his research interests include playwriting, new play dramaturgy, horror, and immersive horror performances. Our second speaker, Franziska Friedl, is giving a paper called Eating the World, Becoming the World, a food-based approach to death in post-apocalyptic zombie narratives. Franziska is a doctoral researcher in the DFG-funded research training group, Authority and Trust, at the Heidelberg Center for American Studies. In her dissertation, titled Unsettling Narratives, The Mythical Making and Unmaking of the USA in Post-Apocalyptic Zombie Texts, she examines the configuration of body and space in post-apocalyptic reimaginings of the American city, frontier, and wilderness. Our third speaker, Zebadiah Kraft, is giving a talk called Nourishment and Longing in Undead Romances. Zebadiah teaches at University of Alaska, Anchorage, and specializes in contemporary literature, video games, and the undead. He's currently writing about the cultural turn to metamodernism and video game utopianism, and he's particularly interested in the most recent episteme of the zombie as the critical figure of shifting social and cultural landscapes in a climate-ravaged future. And our final speaker on this panel, Heather Bass, is giving a talk called Slaughter and Separatism, Female Protagonists in Zombie Mashups. Heather is both the Writing and Communication Center coordinator and an adjunct lecturer at Fayetteville State University. She's currently seeking her doctorate in literature and criticism at the Indiana University in Pennsylvania. Why can I not read today? I apologize, people. Usually I can do languages and words all together. Yeah. Her current research interests include monster studies and horror films. So please welcome JD.
Still, thank you, Renee, for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be the little amuse-bouche to this panel here. I'm so sorry. I'm a first-year PhD student at the University of Georgia. However, this research that I'm going to present today owes a lot, in fact, owes everything to the archives of the Michelle Smith Performing Arts Library at the University of Maryland at College Park, where I finished my master's earlier this year. In those archives, there are historical documents of Washington, D.C.'s Woolly Mammoth Theater Company, as well as the private papers of the longtime resident artistic director Howard Shawwitz. With Woolly Mammoth's reputation for new plays and new play development, it's easy for someone like me to lose themselves in DC theater history with the contents of this archive. Woolly Mammoth's archival records include production photos, copies of scripts for plays produced once in the 80s and then never again, composition books filled with notes from artistic director Howard Shawwitz, a fellow bad handwriting aficionado, and most importantly for this presentation, meeting agendas. What you're looking here is a meeting agenda that might be a little hard to read, although some of it is going to get, the critical part of it is going to get blown up in the next slide, so you will see that there. This is the meeting agenda for from October of 2014 for the 2015 world premiere play written by Robert O'Hara called Zombie the American. Robert O'Hara was previously noted for his 2011 semi-autobiographical and satiric play Booty Candy. which turned out to be a successful run in other regional theaters after its premiere at Woolly Mammoth in 2011. He also directed the run-ups to and the Broadway production of Slave Play in early 2020 on Broadway. Yes, there was Broadway theater in early 2020. We don't like to remember. This play is titled Zombie the American. In the first of the three folders sits the agenda for this first production meeting. The notes center on zombies' appearance in film, though, which I guess if those of us who work in theater might know, the list of zombie plays that you can think of might not be terribly long. That's why I gravitated toward this one. And the point being that they want this play to be, to quote the information on the meeting, zombie conversant. It appears from other notes in the agenda that the film very much wants to be zombie conversant. Notes include references to Night of the Living Dead, directed by George Romero, World War Z, directed by Mark Forster, and the AMC series The Walking Dead. There are others, but I will be centering these three in order to mine the production's concept of zombie conversant and demonstrate the influence of these films as they pertain to Zombie the American. As the meeting agenda suggests, many concepts of mise-en-scène begin with a comparative of zombie aesthetics in cinema. Movement is of particular importance, and the dramaturgy extends past the slow, fast binary. World War Z would have been popular at the time with the fast zombies, and Night of the Living Zone with its slow, creeping zombies, including asking what the zombie's center is. That would be like if you're a performer, how you center your body and how you lead your body on stage. How would a zombie do this in performance? This question demonstrates a desire to remain zombie conversant while acknowledging that this is still going to be a live, embodied performance. The zombie conversant section lists 5 contributors, none of them which are the listed dramaturg on the program. They seem to have contributed various anecdotes and dramaturgical information to provide director Schalwitz and other artists working in the production a background in the zombie as an agent of political unrest. In a prominent note listed as, quote, rep/dem aside, a contributor notes, and this is where I'm going to blow up the screen for you, and if you can't read it, I'm going to read it for you. I recall an observation I read on the internet which pointed out that zombie movies are popular when Republicans are in charge and vampires when Democrats have the stage because they represent the worst fears of those not in power. Democrats fear mindless hordes of anti-intellectuals, parenthetical brain-eating, conformists who want to turn us into them. Republicans fear elitists with pansexual appetites and foreign sympathies who want to turn us into them. I could spend the entire length of this panel examining a timeline of zombie films and presidential administrations to see if this aligns, if I would love to do that, frankly, but there is really no need to do that, though since any person with a passing knowledge of zombie and vampire films must acknowledge that each subgenre of horror maintains its popularity, no matter which political party is in power. For example, The Walking Dead and World War Z, previously mentioned, are major projects of the Obama era, obviously. Pulling at the loose threads in this theory may yield its own presentation, and yet I wish to argue that this colloquial postulate places politics and consumption into conversation with each other. In her essay, Flesh Like One's Own, Benign Denial of Legitimate Complaint, Kayama L. Glover neatly summarizes the period of zombie films post George Romero's 1968 Night of the Living Dead by identifying zombies as infinite and undifferentiated protagonists of the apocalypse, as well as dazed, hungry, shuffling aimlessly in search of meat to eat. She later clarifies the previously mentioned examples contemporary to zombie, and this is where she refers to them of the era as literally violently ill. I want to pause here. Glover's essay talks about the zombie in a way that she wants to reclaim the zombie as though she wants to reclaim blackness. It might be discussed later, but the zombie was stolen from Haiti when the U.S. occupied Haiti from 1950 to 1934, and that is where we get the first zombie play and the first zombie film in the early 30s in the United States. Robert O'Hara himself is a black playwright, but I would argue that he does not really address race in the same way that Glover wants to address race. In fact, the idea of reclaiming the zombie, as we will see later, might prove to be a little tricky and maybe even a little impossible, based on the way that he uses it in this play. Zombies and vampires as horror cinematic tropes consume live human flesh or blood to sustain themselves. In breaking down the power structure in the world of Robert O'Hara's text, I find consumption is the critical element in Zombie the American. In this way, it is similar to zombie films post-1968. If we were to consider zombies politically, as O'Hara's play and Woolly Mammoth's production of this of it intended to do, then the production must be examined as a creation of its time, its own monster intended to scale or perhaps sensationalize audience with effective mise-en-scène and satirical writing. I'm going to be focusing on his writing as we move along. The research in this paper will center the zombie in performance, and specifically a close read of Zombie the American as a transposition of cinematic tropes of zombie behaviors and philosophies. I will argue that O'Hara's play, by giving voice and power to zombies, reflects the concepts of neoliberal power and its slow or slithering descent into authoritarianism. Thus, by giving the zombie power and agency usually foisted upon it, or rather through, or even including through it, the consumption of flesh becomes less a method of survival and an offering, I use that word directly, offering, and you'll see why, to its own power. These methods result in a consolidation of performances between zombies on film and zombies on stage, previously referenced drum, which reflects the previous dramaturgical intent. All right, this I'm going to move along here and talk about the play. Because we are entering into a relatively zombie-rich landscape with the properties that I talked about before, with World War Z and with The Walking Dead. So there's a lot that they had to draw on from this production. And it is into this rich, zombie-rich media landscape late in the Obama era that Woolly Mammoth produces the world premiere of this play. I'm going to summarize and close read this play. I'm guessing that very few people have heard of this play. I hadn't heard of this play. I do new play development. I love it. I love new plays. I never heard of this. Those who know zombie and theater are one of the two. Here's another previously lost to the archives. Now, O'Hara's play does not specifically to specify the precise process of zombification. A lot of movies don't do that, but this one doesn't either, preferring to dramatize the power relationship between the US government and, yes, there is a corresponding zombie government in this play. It is a political satire. If you go to TFW, the Theater Rights website, it is listed as a Jacobian Dr. Strangelove. Which suggests, very dark themes and a lot of violence. It is also a bloodfest. I use bloodfest scholarly here, and I'm going to use some of O'Hara's stage directions as evidence here. One of the moments in the climax of the play, the stage direction reads, "Slit," in all caps. Valentine has slit Chase's throat and blood sprays everywhere, and I mean all caps everywhere. Get the audience wet, all caps, exclamation point. When the play begins, the East Coast is underwater. I don't know, yes, I didn't mention before, but this play is set in 2063 America. So roughly 40 years from now. When the play begins, the East Coast is underwater, the government is now situated in the hollowed out heads of Mount Rushmore. America has its first gay president and its first gentleman, addressed as Lord President, and the play chronicles a fraught moment in the re-election campaign of Lord President Valentine. The president's decapitated body is hung off the nose of one of the Mount Rushmore presidents, and the likely culprit is the governor running against the Lord President. Oh, and as you might guess, there are zombies in the basement of Mount Rushmore. This is not a new development, as the zombies tell Valentine in a flashback to his first night as president 4 years earlier. At this point, the zombies only reveal that they remain in the shadows, which in this case refers to the basement of Mount Rushmore, as I said, that there are hordes of them, and it's critical to this discussion to quote the zombie speaker of zombies, quote, "If at any point you deem it necessary to seek our counsel, an offering is required." And O'Hara always capitalizes offering everywhere it occurs in the play. Zombies residing in the basement nods to their undead status existing underground. In Woolly Mammoth's production, Mount Rushmore Oval Office rises to reveal the zombie chambers. So here I'm going to show you some production photos. This is the Mount Rushmore Oval Office here. It seems to more resemble a throne, which is how O'Hara describes it actually at one point in the beginning of the second act, where the president and the first gentleman engage in some ravaged lovemaking on top of the throne. I should have written that down, how he describes it. It's fabulous. But as you can see, there are heights to this set, and then this set changes to reveal the zombie government below it. Yes, they also have their own government. There's the chairwoman, the speaker, and the minority whip of the zombies. They resemble, the American form of government. They have agency. They speak. They have political debates amongst each other that are at once talking and also just little hisses, as you might expect. And this character here is the ex-president, but is still in the president's cabinet. The word offering is capitalized throughout the play. The zombies are never shown to skulk and shuffle outside of the chamber in search of food, as they do in many horde zombie films. The notes in Woolly Mammoth's production suggest a privileging of slow zombie over the fast zombies, as I mentioned before. The offering is first mentioned and clarified in Scene 3 as the Lady President and current Lady Secretary of State, this is her, the Lady Secretary of State, plead for the Zombie Council's assistance in the coming civil war, as you might expect when the Vice President is murdered by the opposing presidential candidate. She has no offering and is outright dismissed. Only when Valentine enters carrying the body of Secretary General of the United African Nations do the zombies concur to assist the government. The zombies have agency in this play, as I mentioned. They speak and do not kill anyone during this play. As I said, they do not hunt, they do not kill, they are offered flesh, and that is it. It is implied that they can cause violence if they want to, but they never do during this play. Both offerings are consumed on stage. Both bodies given to the horde as offerings are significant political figures within the play, and important, these zombies do not hunt until unleashed by Valentine at the end. Then even then, their point is not to destroy more flesh, it is to embrace zombification as defined by the play itself. The climax, during which Valentine meets with the zombie horde as they demand another offering and insisting that the zombies will eat, demanding that the zombies eat only the bad people when they are unleashed. The zombies show footage of early 21st century Americans living blissfully unaware of American atrocities. To the basement zombie horde, there are many species of zombie. This species of zombie is called American, hence zombie the American. There are elements of this play I don't really have time to engage with here. There are clones living among us, the true purpose of which is unclear narratively in the play, except the fact that the zombies refuse clones as is a vegetarian option. While this play certainly presents its climax with a heavy hand, I have to say that, I must note that the performance is still indeed zombie conversant, as the zombies' explanation harkens to the pre-cannibalistic horde, to the B-movies post-World War II dramatizing the dissolve of human agency, which the play links to American indifference in the play's final tableau, as all figures on stage, all actors become zombies. Not just the ones that are already existing zombies, and not just the offerings that had previously been consumed as zombies, but also the actors that were just humans and are now walked towards the audience as the lights go blackout. While presenting his thesis in the play's final two scenes, and by combining the ideas of zombies defined not by voodoo origins, but by American cinematic exploits, O'Hara reifies the zombie as a figure of American indifference, a cultural practice stolen and altered to the point of being unrecognizable. The American is indifferent to the concept of being a zombie, which represents complete removal from a cultural practice. As such, the Americans in O'Hara's play make offerings, not waiting for the zombies to act out of necessity, but rather inviting the cannibalism into the chambers of government. No party is mentioned in Zombie the American. Remember before, Republican, Democrat, no party is mentioned in this play. Just governments. And the only government to treaty with the zombies are the Americans. As such, Zombie the American presents not only a government willing to offer flesh as a means of maintaining tenuous power structures, but a citizenry willing to watch it happen to others. The final moment in which the audience enters the audience represents consolidated power. We get the neoliberal government of the United States merging with the shadow government of the zombies to create an authoritarianism that will consume all that they see, thus being us, seated in the audience as they break the fourth wall. And that is what I have for you. Thank you very much.
And I welcome you to my presentation, Eating the World, Becoming the World, a food-based approach to death in the Walking Dead franchise. In later seasons of AMC's critically acclaimed television series The Walking Dead, viewers witness a curious and constant saturation of the surrounding natural space with zombies. The rotting corpses are everywhere, submerged in swarms, lying in flowering meadows, stuck in mud, sand, snow, or trees. Caves, rivers, beaches, forests, fields, even oceans contain the monstrous undead. Swarms, which have always been considered dangerous territory, have become an even more threatening environment as walkers lurk underneath the water, having become a part of their surrounding. Plants and moss are growing inside and around them. As you can see, some of them are even stuck in some reeds over there. What does not translate from video to screenshot is the fact that they are rooted to one spot, having become a part of the environment itself. Zombies becoming integral elements of the landscape is especially apparent in the last episode of the series, where Rick is standing on a riverbank with zombies integrated into it. These are not passive corpses lying still, but a living, moving part of the landscape. They move their jaws and arms, still trying to grab and eat, even if they can no longer walk. The notion of the dead becoming the literal ground the living walk on is expounded on in the third series of the Walking Dead franchise. The Walking Dead World Beyond was released during the 10th season of The Walking Dead and has not garnered much critical acclaim. However, in the context of food, death, and nature, it becomes an intriguing text to analyze as it places a strong emphasis on eco-critical imagery. This is evident from the very beginning, as this promotional material advertising the first season demonstrates. The zombie body has not only fused with nature, but become space itself. In this image, which is supposed to represent the show as a whole, the zombie is literally the ground they stand on. All of these are examples of what Jeffrey Jerome Cohen has dubbed a zombie ecology in his essay, Grey, a Zombie Ecology. I've been told you have to quote Cohen in this conference. So I went there, and it is not monster theory. He has written other stuff. So I quote, "We realize it is not simply the human body that is an assemblage of discordant, agental, and unvitalized objects, but the earth itself. Undead means differently alive. The very ground we walk on, our future tomb, is alive in its supposed inertness, forever on the move, a foundation as well as our ruin, the undead material from which we construct our worlds." In the second episode of World Beyond, the protagonists encounter a zombie which a swarm of wasps has chosen as its nest. When it opens its mouth, wasps come spilling out. While I'm certain that the main intent of this scene is its shock value, wasps are scary, zombies are scary. Do you know what would be super scary? A zombie filled with wasps. And yet, if we distance ourselves from our knee-jerk reaction of repulsion and disgust, there's a lot to discover here. The wasps have chosen to form a relationship with the dead body. It's their home now. They must have had a reason to choose a zombie of all places. We can assume that the zombie, keen on consuming any meat in its proximity, unintentionally protects them from larger predators. This example illustrates the ecological potential of the dead body in zombie fiction. As Cohen puts it, decomposition is the flourishing of bacteria, the autonomy of the world, an unyielding demonstration of the inhuman agency that resides in the pieces and substances that we totalize for a while into a body we call ours. Decay is a process of transformation. It seems final, fatal, and terminal, but this activity is future-directed, creative, and uninterested in our mourning. Which brings me to Val Plumwood. After nearly dying, because a crocodile considered her to be its next meal, Australian philosopher Val Plumwood developed what she dubbed a food-based approach to death. When the crocodile attacked her, she was, of course, hurt and frightened. But she was also piqued, offended even. How could this animal dare to consider her as its next meal? To consider her, a human being, as food? I quote, "My disbelief about being food, of believing the human to be a part, eaters of others, but never ourselves eaten, or that it is profoundly wrong, has been the dominant story about human identity, a story of human hyper-separation from nature. This is an old and very powerful story, which is in turn linked to our culture's approach to the problem of death. In the Western world, humans consider themselves to be outside of the food web. We can eat others, but but they can never eat us. This is apparent in Western burial practices, which separates the dead body from the environment with a coffin, or as it is popular here in the US, preserves the body with formaldehyde to stop it from becoming food. On page 35, Plumwood states that we are, quote, under constant siege and desperately, obsessively seeking to keep the body, this body made out of food, away from others and retain it for ourselves alone, quote end. This deep-seated fear is nowhere more apparent than in horror movies, where humans regularly become the food of others. Aliens, vampires, and in our example, zombies. I propose that both Cohen's notion of zombie ecology and Plumwood's food-based approach to death can be tied to the cannibalistic nature of zombies, which is foundational to greater corporate unification. I draw on Kilgour's insights on the cultural function of cannibalism, which were the original inspiration for this presentation, as she focuses on the potential of cannibalism to overcome, quote, the isolation to which the modern world has condemned us, quote end. Like Plumwood, she argues that in the modern world, the individual subject has to maintain a clear separation of inside and outside, of self and other. It is insular and detached from others. However, this individual identity comes at a cost, the loss of greater corporate identification. I quote, the cost of modern autonomy is solitary confinement, isolation in the prison house of the self, which produces a simultaneous desire to return to our original experience, to relinquish the discontents of civilization for an original state of unity and oneness with the world, signified by the act of cannibalism. Therefore, cannibalistic bodies are antithetical to the human hyper-separation from nature as described by Plumwood. They refuse to remain separated from the outside world. Of course, in the zombie apocalypse, surviving humans become food, but so do zombies themselves. As becomes apparent in all the examples we have examined in the beginning, zombies do not only consume, but they are also consumed. By becoming an integral part of the landscape, they enter a reciprocal relationship with their surrounding. While they might feed on passing humans or wildlife, moss, worms, fungi, and bacteria are also feeding on them. Notably, zombies that have achieved this original state of unity and oneness with the world, as Kilgour puts it, are often spared by survivors. They are allowed to continue their post-human existence, thereby negating the distinction between self and other, inside and outside, humans and the world surrounding them. Early traces of this pattern can be found in season 3, where Herschel tells Carl to spare a walker who cannot move because he is pinned by a branch. Don't. You don't need to, he says as Carl raises his gun. The zombie ends up not being shot. From season 9 onwards, we see more and more examples of this. For instance, in the episode Who Are You Now?, viewers encounter this scene. So, the character named Daryl first draws a knife when he hears a noise, ready to kill. Then he encounters the zombie stuck in a tree. We have a screenshot of that here. Worms are crawling in and on its torso, which in turn serves as food for a bird and its fledglings. It's a really cute scene, that's why I wanted to show you. Like, you might see the worms, and then there's like a little Disney princess bird. and it flies to its nest, and it feeds the fledglings, and then there's like romantic music playing, and it's like a moment of hope. And then Daryl like pockets his knife and doesn't kill the zombie in the tree. So this zombie has become part of the food web. And upon realizing the extent of this net of relations, Daryl reconsiders. In contrast, only a few minutes earlier, we see Daryl effortlessly kill a zombie that rises from the river and attacks him. The juxtaposition highlights his hesitation as he realizes that he doesn't need to kill him. And so, Eating the world eventually leads to the process of becoming the world by becoming food, by being eaten by the world. Which brings me to my conclusion. Every natural cycle contains death and decay. Decomposition is a vital part of every ecosystem. In the Western world, humans have to separate themselves from the natural world because accepting nature would not only mean to accept death, but the material reality of our body as food. Food for worms, fungi, insects. Only as long as we stand above nature can we stand above death. To let Plumwood have the closing remarks of this presentation, a reconceptualization of ourselves in ecological terms has many aspects. But one of the most fundamental is to begin to think of ourselves in terms of our usefulness to the other elements of our ecosystem, in the same way as other components. One of the most basic ways is to begin to think of ourselves humbly as food for others. Becoming food, or rather accepting the fact that our bodies have always been food, allows us to rethink human identity not outside or above the ecosystem, but as part of them. Thank you for your attention.
How's it going? Do I have to stand like super close to this? Maybe I'll just hold it. I will probably walk away too. I get very animated. Sometimes. Maybe not right now, but usually. Just a quick note. I wrote this morning, and I'm going to read it, but that only barely matches up with these PowerPoint slides. I wasn't intending to do like a paper, but I decided to this morning because it was a good motivation, because this is part of a big project that I'm trying to work on, putting together a book for a metamodernism series. And so in my work, I talk about popular culture zombies who have, for most of their existence, used cannibalism as a metaphor for something to be guarded against. Well-known examples we all know, right, are the Haitian immigrants, or later with Romero become symbols of mass consumerism, and they become hyper-zombies related to medical malfeasance or technology or fear of, new things, right? So those are really popular zombies. Video game zombies are, you get to go and kill as many things as you can. It brings you like this weird joy in slaughter, all that sort of stuff, right? Or for survival, right? We're guarding against something by killing the zombies, trying to survive in the zombie apocalypse. But for this part of my work, I'm more interested in sort of not that kind of zombie or that definition of the zombie. I'm interested in how they've been defined as useful but tired metaphors. And I'm more interested in getting away from what NPR defines them as in 2020 as our favorite brain-dead punching bags, or something that as recently as this year, in August, the New Yorker had an article called Our Zombie Culture, I think is what it was called. I think that was the title, I forget. But in that article, the author refers to zombies as mindless. What presents as its will is really a drift toward the mean, toward the unconsciousness of crowds, right? So this sort of description of the zombie as unthinking doesn't have a bigger version of itself, and we don't have a bigger version of the zombie that has its own interests, its own evolutions, and its own desire to survive. And academic writing often does this as well, but not as often. It's a little more nuanced, obviously, because we're academics, and that's what we do in monster studies. So anyway, we need to remember to define the zombie or to redefine it. And for me, I define the zombie as a figure of a new set of alliances of race, class, gender, and politics, coagulating into mordant, incongruous, and ever closer and more violent post-human beings who also have complex relationships and evolve to survive, and who only sometimes need to survive on the flesh of the living. Sometimes they survive in other ways, like finding love or building a family, going on a date. Okay, so the contemporary zombie narrative that encapsulates the contemporary zombie narrative encapsulates the unstable complexity of our lives, and so I define them as us, as living monsters under the weight of end-stage capitalism. And what we see in what I term metamodern zombies is zombies who want to survive, who want to find some kind of being for themselves, and we see people who want to be infected by the zombie virus or become a zombie in order to come back to some kind of meaningful existence, some kind of lived experience worth having, right? And so we see a lot of things where the living are actually more monstrous and more the thing we don't want to be than the zombie. Zombies become beautiful, they become engaged, they become protagonists, right, in their own stories. Really, we see hate, violence, and cruelty of humanity more in zombie narratives through the human participants in those stories than we do through the zombies in the ones that I'm talking about. That's not universally true. If you play like Call of Duty, for example, the zombies are the things that are just out there to be killed. But we exist in what Gene and John Komaroff describe as an uneasy fusion of enfranchisement and exclusion, hope and hopelessness, of a radically widening chasm between rich and poor, of the effort to realize modern utopias by postmodern means. And so in helping to define what we call metamodernism, these two authors talk about this sort of back and forth, constant oscillation between hope and hopelessness, between fear and joy, between all these sort of competing poles that aren't necessarily opposite, but it's competing affective registers at the same time that we see in texts of metamodernism. And so for me, I like to think about metamodernism through the zombie and how it invites us to be infected, how it represents a proliferation of affective structures, and it sort of undoes a lot of what is traditionally called the zombie. And this is a piece of art that you really can't see that. But this is by George Fow. It's called Zombie Index, and it's just a stencil drawing that he did, or a pencil drawing of like 10,000 or something different zombies from different texts that he could find. And it's just an illustration of zombies, like, Where's Waldo? Like, find your favorite zombie, and then see if he represents it there. Anyway, so for me, the metamodern zombie is a critical representation of the cultural paradigm shift laid bare since the change to end-stage capitalism, which I don't define because I'm lazy and I wrote this morning. Okay. So the change exists at the nexus of our becoming more zombified than many of the so-called monsters of our historical reference points. We're no longer swept away only by mindlessness or what Waldman calls zombiehood's self-loss, the end of moral choice. We're now swept away by the freedom and opportunity afforded by zombification as something positive rather than the appeal of nothingness or some void we can fall into without actually dying. So as such, the zombie has taken on the role of survivor in survival narratives and become the protagonist and ally, not just in metaphor or transgressive narratives, but fighting alongside the living in really popular narratives fighting alongside the living who haven't quite come to terms or cannot come to terms with loss. Sorry, I got a dry mouth. I got to drink something really quickly. Should have brought some water. We exist in a state of longing for the simpler existence of the zombie, and in a state of mourning our apocalyptic present, searching for a future where consumption, even cannibal consumption, can be life-affirming. Zombies in metamodern times open potential for new kinship relations with the earth, new romantic ideals, or reanimated love between partners. Narratives of lived experience in the dead come back to life to offer insight to the affective dominant being an embrace and rejection simultaneously of our liminal realities, showing the one thing we share is that end-stage capitalism is fighting us all off to survive, and it's winning. I don't know if you knew that, but it's winning. Through rejection of the normal or mean and an embracing of the self as monstrous but inherently holding value, zombies have become an affirmative monster for the sense of hope long embodied in transgressive spaces that are once more becoming monstrous to the status quo at an alarming rate. The current iteration of capitalism, then, is the monster we have seen portrayed as undead humans. Its hunger for all of our livelihoods has turned us all into post-apocalyptic undead things. Now we have to find lives in the ruins together. In its ubiquitous cultural visibility, we find zombies who seek romantic partners, and in the living more parity and potential than they had before death. So I wanted to just talk about a couple of brief examples, and some of the terms that I'm interested in thinking about metamodernism are valiant optimism and the ability that we have to see an ending world, but still find joy, still find family, still find reason for going on, right? So living after the apocalypse or the many competing apocalypses of our present, and drawing on Sebastian Munoz, who we talked about earlier in the keynote, from Queer Futurity and Queer Utopias, talking about neo-romanticism and radical togetherness. And so we can see in a lot of zombie narratives of the examples I have and of many, many hundreds of others that we don't have time for, this idea that we can create new relationships and we can explore our oppressed selves or our repressed selves or the things that the status quo or society doesn't want us to show or want us to enact. So it allows more humanism, right, through falling in love with a dead body. So my first example is Santa Clarita Diet. And, sorry, I accidentally scrolled really far. So Sheila's an interesting figure because she is sort of a middle-class American woman who is a realtor with her husband and a realty team that is losing ground, right? They are sort of slowly seeing the American dream slip away. They are stuck in a rut and all these sorts of things until she eats some bad oysters and becomes undead. When she becomes undead, she regains this sense of control, this sense of strength, this sense of like herself as a woman, and she is able to sort of turn the tide and take back what is her version of the American dream. And her husband, Joel, if you haven't seen this show, it's really worth watching just for Joel because that guy's great. But basically what happens is they become these sort of anti-heroes, right? These sort of figures of, in talking about unheroic heroes, these figures of people who are murdering and eating ostensibly innocent people, but mostly they focus on like neo-Nazis, incels, pedophiles, things like that, right? They try to turn it into something positive, and at the same time, they're able to really come back together. They're able to regain some of the stuff lost in their personal relationships and their experience. I keep hitting a thing on my iPad that moves it like 4 pages up. I don't know how to do that. Okay. So her and her husband embrace her undeadness to become more than they could when fully alive, and they rekindle family ties. They enact sort of our fantasies of vigilantism, right, these things, and so we follow along and we fall in love with them in this sort of radical togetherness that they create. And at the very end of the show, this isn't really important right now, but Joel becomes a zombie in the last scene, which is made me sad because I really wanted to keep going. Anyway. My next example is the best movie ever made, if you know me. I assume from the laughs you've seen it. So this is about repression and self-compassion, right? So Swiss Army Man is a film by the Daniels. It's their first film before Everything Everywhere All at Once, everybody's familiar with. But this is a zombie film. I don't think most people think of it as a zombie film, but it's a zombie film in terms of through the relationship that is built by Hank, who is a repressed suicidal stalker, which is he's a troubling figure, right? He's an unheroic figure. He's very lonely. He's an emblematic of the loneliness epidemic. And through finding this dead body and telling it his worries, telling it his desires, and telling it the problems of his life and trying to recreate through nostalgia and through teaching this dead body about life, Manny comes to life and they fall in love. They create a society for themselves out of the trash that they find in the woods behind the girl who Hank was stalking's house. And there's an epic moment where Manny saves his life in their first kiss because he's drowning after falling off a pipe going across a river. And they kiss, and then Manny turns into like a flotation device and takes him back to the surface. Anyway, so learning to love through acceptance of the self, Manny brings Hank out of the epidemic of loneliness that he's in, and they force the wider world to see their relationship as meaningful rather than something that's grotesque, something that should be repressed, something that is unacceptable to people in society, Hank's dad, things along those lines. So he's able to overcome and build a society in the woods where they can relive their youths without fear. They can sort of start over and have a new life after Manny comes back to life as a zombie. And at the end of the film, Manny, it sort of breaks the sort of post-magical realism or the possibility that it's all a hallucination of Hank's and he's just putting Manny into something in a hallucination, because at the end of the film, everybody else also sees Manny come to life and take off. with a big smile on his face, and Hank is able to go back into society having this new version of himself. And so they quite literally dwell in the dissolve, right? They make a home together out of dead animals and rotten things from an old dump site, and they use Manny's erect penis as a compass, and they build the nostalgic remnants of the things that Hank valued in culture, right? So through his nostalgia and his use of popular culture like Jurassic Park and E.T. and things like that, he's able to not just teach Manny how to live, but how to teach himself how to live and be open and be in a relationship. My next example is Warm Bodies, and this is a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, where the main character, R, is a zombie, and he goes about his day searching for brains to eat so that he can gain memories from people, so that he can have some kind of remnant of humanity. And he ends up eating the brains of a girl, and then finding that girl and sort of kidnapping her because he kind of falls in love with her, he likes her, from eating her boyfriend's brains and seeing their relationship blossom and then erode and things like that. So after kidnapping her, he falls in love with her and reawakens from his zombie-as mindless state as their relationship blossoms. And so R is able to come out of his zombie state and fight the zombies, keeping him and others under from the bonies, who represent apathy and divisiveness, these sort of crushing weights of social expectation, right? The othering forces, along with Julie's father, who runs the military camp that humans survive in. Am I running out of time? Okay. We won't look at the other ones. How much time do I have?
You're 1 minute over.
Okay, I'll stop. Anyway, the point of this is that these examples are ways that I think are interesting, that the zombie is sort of taking back this idea of nourishment and care and life from what was traditionally the survivor in zombie apocalypses, trying to keep something from being lost. Now we lost it. It's gone. It ain't coming back. And the zombies who are creating their own version of society, I think, are more interesting than the hordes of The Walking Dead, for example. Okay, I'm done.
Got my timer. I don't think it's going to really help me that much, though. All right. Hi, my name is Heather Bass. Hello, it's there. Slaughter and Separatism, Feminism, and Zombie Mashups. Jane Austen and Graham Smith's Pride and Prejudice and Zombies begins with the following line, quote, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a zombie in possession of brains must be in want of more brains," end quote. Just like that, the mashup, particularly the zombie mashup, invaded bookstores. Despite its racial beginnings, the undead that lurks in these pages resemble more of George A. Romero's 1968 Night of the Living Dead. Similarly, mashups such as Graham Smith's 2009 Pride and Prejudice and Zombies operates in appropriation. Seth Grahame-Smith and other authors who mash up literary classics with monsters repurpose the original text. As Marie Mulvey Roberts notes, the majority of these mashups are Americans co-authoring with English classics. Zombies have shambled their way into Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre and Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. All three hypotext probably would be great. Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, Jane Eyre, and Alice's Adventures in Wonderland feature female protagonists. Their mashups reimagine these leading ladies in various ways. Graham Smith's Elizabeth Bennet is a zombie slayer. Sheriff Browning's Irwin's Jane Slayer kills zombies and vampires alike. However, Nicholas Cook's Alice never spills blood or zombie guts, as her main goals are to first find the lovely graveyard, then go home. All three protagonists find themselves surrounded by the undead, but only Alice avoids being ridden with violent tendencies. Another key difference is that both Elizabeth and Jane are set on their zombie slaying paths by male mentors, while Alice follows her curiosity as in the original. Throughout my research, I compared the correlation between bloodlust and perceived feminism in all three hypertexts. I conclude that Elizabeth and Jane failed to be the feminist role models from their original texts in their roles as slayers, becoming as monstrous as the zombies they purge. In contrast, Alice exemplifies a feminist role model by separating her identity from the undead of Zombieland and avoiding becoming monstrous. For those of you who somehow escaped reading Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen's novel follows the Bennet family, particularly Elizabeth, in Georgian Regency England, a time when marrying partners of higher or equal social and financial status was a priority. The reader is meant to favor Elizabeth and her ideals of marriage on equal terms. Michelle L. Roshevsky, explains that Elizabeth displays proto-feminist ideology through Elizabeth Bennet. As readers, we view people and events through Elizabeth's perspective. Seth Grahame-Smith fits Austen's classic into a zombie invasion, with the Bennet girls becoming sword-wielding, ass-kicking warriors defending England. While Elizabeth's role as a warrior could be considered necessary in a zombie apocalypse, Grahame-Smith's protagonist takes it too far. Elizabeth embraces in violence, even to the point of contemplating killing her fellow humans for either insults to her pride or just being really annoying. In one notable scene, Elizabeth battles Lady Catherine de Bourgh's ninjas, strangling one with his own bowels and biting into another's heart. Yum. Miriam Borum-Puyol, in her article New Adventures in Old Texts, Gender Roles and Cultural Canons in 21st Century Mashups, asserts that by including zombies in these acts of violence, Elizabeth defies traditional masculinity and becomes an adventurer in her own story. However, I agree more with Kyle Williams Bishop's view of survivors of the zombie apocalypse becoming monsters themselves in his book, How Zombies Conquered Popular Culture. While Bishop's observation pertains to Robert Kirkman's characters in the Walking Dead comic series, Elizabeth exhibits similar qualities in many instances of Grahame-Smith's mashup, including the ninja fight. Aside from hyperbolic violence, Grahame-Smith's mashup shifts Elizabeth's character from plucky to monstrous. Following an encounter with a group of zombies on a trip to Meryton with her cousin Mr. Collins, Elizabeth sets the zombies on fire. After declaring that God does not show mercy, and neither should them, we catch a glimpse of how different this new Elizabeth is from Austen's heroine. And I quote, "Though angered by her blasphemy, he thought better of saying anything on the matter, for he saw in Elizabeth's eyes a kind of darkness, kind of absence, as if her soul had taken leave, so that compassion and warmth could not interfere." End quote. Although this is not the only instance where her humanity is questioned. In portraying Elizabeth as such, she becomes less of a feminist icon and more reflective of Barbara Creed's monstrous feminine. In service of His Majesty, she pays with her humanity. To acquire her skills in the deadly arts, Elizabeth and her sisters are trained by a mysterious Chinese teacher, Master Lu. Elizabeth both reveres and fears him throughout her references to him and his teaching methods. When Elizabeth mistakenly agrees to dance with Mr. Darcy, Elizabeth admonishes herself, quote, "If Master Lu had seen such a lapse of awareness, 20 lashes at least, and another 20 trips up and down the 1,000 steps of Quan Si," unquote, end quote. During their dance, Elizabeth reflects on the strenuous, borderline cruel training she and her sisters underwent under his tutelage. In service of a king, and under the instruction of a Chinese master, Grahame-Smith's Elizabeth is not the proto-feminist that we remember. She is traumatized and brainwashed to believe that she must kill. Elizabeth frequently reminds those around her, and thus the reader, she is a warrior first and a woman second. Charlotte Bronte's Jane Slayer is another mashup of an English classic. Bronte's original text acts as a coming-of-age story of Jane, who begins as a dependent of her aunt and ends with her as an independent adult. While her love story with Edward Rochester becomes central to the latter part of Bronte's novel, Jane's quest to assert her independence remains a constant. Sherry Browning Irwin's reimagining follows the central plot, but with werewolves, vampires, and of course zombies. Jane asserts her independent nature through her will and wooden stakes. The blood and gore may be tamer in this mashup, but we nonetheless are treated to zombie goo. While Irwin does not place Jane in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, Jane eventually must face zombies when the harsh schoolmaster, Mr. Brocklehurst, raises girls for a future of servitude and deliverance from the grave. When these risen girls taste meat, they go full-on zombie with a voracious appetite for flesh. This happens when a cook accidentally makes meat pies during the typhus outbreak. Jane then aids Miss Temple in killing the zombie girls in what is justified as freeing their souls from an eternity of servitude. In slaying the zombies, Jane and Miss Temple dismantle Mr. Brocklehurst's regime. Bronte's Jane Eyre resembles Austen's Elizabeth in her willingness in forging her path. Jane Slayer, in contrast, keeps Jane's spirit but taints it with a zeal for monster slaying. During one of her nights at Lowood, young Jane fantasizes about killing. Quote, "That night on going to bed, I forgot to prepare the imaginary supper of hot roast potatoes and spinach that had got me through many a night of burnt porridge and meager portions of bread. I feasted instead on the spectacle of ideal drawings that I planned in my head. I imagined, too, my lunging and parrying, thrusting and hacking a bloodthirsty zombie's head clean off. I was sure I could do it. I tingled at the very thought." End quote. This is before the zombie attack on the school, while the zombie girls are still passive, obedient drones. Andrea Ruthven considers both the new mashups with versions of Elizabeth and Jane's and their violent inclinations as post-feminist, accusing both of having superwoman syndrome, where a woman must surpass simple domestic achievements noted in her 2015 thesis. Ruthven implies that the original Jane Eyre needed to go above and beyond her skills as she was not accomplished enough. Additionally, Jane's mission is male-ordained. When young Jane is locked in the Red Room after defying John Reed, the ghost of her Uncle Reed visits her, heartening her to slay her aunt and cousins as part of her Slayer lineage. Jane initially rejects this role, but eventually embraces it with vigor. Oh dear. Jane is later trained in fighting and swordplay by Miss Temple at Lowood. Upon leaving Rochester, the adult Jane is also visited by another ghost, that of her mother, who beckons her to find her relatives. All three women display, in this hypertext, display a need to become superwoman, to be strong and accomplished, and for male acceptance. Lewis Carroll and Nicholas Cook's Alice in Zombieland is different. I won't bore you with the plot of Carroll's classic, as I'm sure you've seen at least one adaptation. Cook's version includes all of Carroll's original characters, but most of these fantastical creatures are now dead and falling apart. The Red Queen is absurdly violent, but now she has an army of zombies and zombified citizens that she controls. Throughout her adventures, Alice is slowly turning into a zombie herself. While we assume that zombie Alice will eventually attack and eat the remaining living denizens of Zombieland, Alice never fully makes the transition. Like Carol's Alice, she goes through a variety of changes. Her hair and teeth fall out, her skin gets paler, and she's got this really mad craving for meat. By becoming a zombie, Alice would forever be a little girl, as Jan Susina claims was Carol's original intention. Instead of making Alice a full-fledged zombie, though, Cook uses the zombification process to emphasize Alice's physical changes. In Carol's classic, Alice shrinks and grows at odd intervals. Regardless of their physical changes, or her physical changes, Alice in Cook's Zombieland doesn't change at her core. At the beginning of the mashup, Alice thinks nothing except for meat pies. And after escaping Zombieland, she's still thinking about those meat pies. Alice never eats the fleshy parts or meaty bits of the creatures in Zombieland. This is in contrast to the other zombies who will eat parts of themselves or other creatures if not supervised by the Red Queen. In the courtroom scene, when Alice mistakenly smashes the Red Queen's box that controls the zombies, they feast. Quote, "In the jury box, two zombies fought over a piece of bloody flesh. Clawing at one another in their hungry rage, a large white rabbit tried to dodge a group of the undead, kicking with its white feet. But the zombies were too intent on their possible meal to feel any discomfort." End quote. She also identifies she never identifies herself as undead, despite her zombification. While Alice questions who she is, much like in Carol's original, she separates herself from those around her. Cook also shows this difference both when she wakes up. Okay. When Alice wakes up from her dream, she is very much alive. By waking up, Alice shows she belongs more to the Victorian world than of the fantastical Zombieland. Other than her lack of bloodlust, Alice is different as she lacks a male mentor and does not act in service of the ruling patriarchy. While Alice takes directions from the horrific creatures around her, more or less, Alice does not follow a path set by a male role model. As Emily Aguelo Perez argues in her 2015 article, Alice is, quote, "assertive, curious, inquisitive, and adventurous, and more importantly, she took the reins of her adventures," unquote. Alice illustrates, yes, I'm on my next last pair.
I wasn't.
Okay. I'm like, okay, 15 minutes. All right. So Alice illustrates a feminism that does not include violence or over-the-top feats of strength and skill. She's just Alice. Despite their dedication to killing monsters, Graham Smith's Elizabeth Bennet and Irwin's Jane Slayer become what they vanquish while following a path set by men. While empowered by her fighting skills, Elizabeth cannot escape losing her humanity and must undergo gruesome training to vanquish the undead. Jane also embraces violence in the name of becoming a slayer and falling prey to becoming a superwoman. However, Alice separates herself from the zombies without the use of force, holding true to her individualism and avoiding becoming a monster herself. Although zombie mashups and the zombie genre in general demand more from women, Cook shows that there is a way to fit women into the zombie apocalypse without them turning into harmful archetypes. Thank you.
All right, we have plenty of time for questions. Okay.
Pass it around, yeah.
Okay, thank you for all of that. That was fabulous. I don't know if I missed it, but I was kind of surprised not to hear anyone mention The Last of Us, which of course is quite popular. And especially I was thinking the talk about the zombies sort of returning back to nature, becoming nature. In The Last of Us, of course, it's this fungus that is growing off of them, so they are really actively nature in a kind of combined and interesting way. I know that wasn't what your talk was about, but I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Thank you so much for your question. Yes, I should have probably, and I think I wanted to include a sentence or like a little asterisk, all of this applies to The Last of Us. Because obviously I wanted to demonstrate that this also happens in The Walking Dead, because this obviously happens in The Last of Us. The Last of Us is kind of like the key text, but The Walking Dead was there first. But I would also argue this happens more in later seasons of The Walking Dead. And The Walking Dead World Beyond was released long after The Last of Us, the video game, was released. So I would argue that The Walking Dead does this as well, shows that they're following the trend that The Last of Us set. So excellent question. Honestly, my bad for not for not including the short annotation.
Yeah, I was going to. Not just The Last of Us, but also Melanie from The Girl with All the Gifts, which is another neonate zombie. And I argue that Ellie is a zombie. She was born infected, but because she was born to a pregnant person who was infected, she comes out not zombified in the way that other people are, but she's immune to the disease, and she clearly has some survival ability that most people don't have. And then another great novel, if you haven't heard of it, is The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey, which is about a neonate zombie child who enacts the apocalypse, like the literal apocalypse, kills everybody in the world, because she becomes in a close family relationship with her teacher, Miss Justineau, and together, through their love for each other, they are able to get to a place in London where they're able to basically do what the cordyceps virus does and spread the seed all over the planet and end humanity, except for in some really tiny places. And then she becomes sort of the president of zombies or whatever, and goes and finds the human beings and says, we're not going to kill you. We have no interest in you because we don't need to eat you to survive. We don't need to do the things that the non-second generation zombies had to do to survive, which was eat human flesh. We don't have that problem anymore. We've developed past it. We're past that version of humanity, and we're trying to help you survive. And so they bring them food and offer help. And so in my discussion of nourishment and care in zombies who are not like the classic zombie, those are, I think, the two best examples, actually. I just didn't have time.
Okay, my answer kind of simple. I was too hyper-focused on the monster mashups to kind of wander into video game territory, but I would love to look into Ellie's character as far as like, does she fall under like one of these harmful archetypes, as in like, does she become monstrous because of her actions? Does she become a superwoman, or does she become a beautiful soul to the Just Warriors? So it's a very interesting concept.
Well, I don't remember the year of the video game. Was it 2014? 2013. Okay, so I think that you could add the Last of Us video game to the zombie landscape that I was talking about for sure. Yeah. So, but other than that, obviously the series hadn't come out in 2015. So.
All right, now I actually thought of a different question, but I'll ask my first question. Because I know each of you mentioned kind of in passing the Haitian zombie, but then we're like, okay, but anyways, I'm talking about something else. And I'm really interested in the origin in Haiti. So I was wondering if you think that, is there any way to read them as like a continuation of your personal zombies as continuations of the Haitian zombies, or can you only consider them as completely separated? And I think, JD, you said a good word for it, like stolen, appropriated, like, yeah.
Then I'll start then. I think that the zombies in O'Hara's play, and I think I don't know what he would think, but they are very much represent the kind of stolen zombies. And in fact, they're different zombies than are kind of represented in the sense that they are not, I remember there was an earlier presentation today where they were, kind of described as being like kind of anarchistic or like, they're, the zombies are the comrades kind of a thing. These zombies are not like that. They're organized, and so they're more reflective of neoliberalism, I think. So I think that this, I mentioned it in the sense that Glover, who wrote one of the articles I sourced, would want to reclaim the zombie, and I think that O'Hara's play suggests that the fact that we are all zombies as Americans means that it is too late for that. So I don't necessarily see that in my context, I don't see a way that there's a way back. So,
Good question. Since we are lucky to have him here today, we have Carl William Bishop here, so I would refer to his authority on the development when it comes to zombies, or Sarah Juliet Lauro, who has also done some great work. There's a lot of literature out there on the Haitian zombie, and still to this day. So there's a lot out there if you're interested. It's always a little bit of a difficult discussion. I have some friends, some colleagues in zombie research. A friend of mine says Get Out is the closest that we have to a zombie fiction in that tradition, because it's important to note that the Haitian zombie does not eat meat. It's not cannibalistic, and it's a very long debate to be had.
Okay, my turn. All right, so I think the closest I get to, or at least with the Haitian zombie, is we see it in Jane Slayer, where we see these girls that are pretty much lower class, being raised up to be these domestics and governesses to the rich. But Irwin takes it a step further by making these girls zombies, and I believe there's like a strong implication there for like indentured enslavement, even though it's not racial. And it's like, if anybody's read Dreadfully Ever After, which is the epilogue book to Pride, Branches, and Zombies, they do hint on the peoples that the England has colonized as being part of the solution for the zombie epidemic. So I'm not sure if that's like a way of that Holland stock reclaiming the zombies' origins, or if it's just a low blow towards England. It could be both.
Yeah, so like I said before I started, I'm more interested in metamodernism as a cultural moment than I am zombies in particular. And metamodernism talks about sort of going back and forth constantly between postmodern predilections, modernist tradition and predilections, and pre-tradition. And so bringing back things like indigenous culture, bring back the Haitian zombie, and thinking about how those things play out in modern contexts is part of thinking about metamodernism and the zombie. And like Swiss Army Man is a good example, right? That's a thing brought back by some kind of magical need from Hank to turn this dead body back into life and serves him in some way. And there's a lot of examples that are appropriating. There's a lot of examples that are sort of like deeply meaningful in the way that different versions of the zombie are being used. So a good one is Blood Quantum by Jeff Barnaby. It's a Micmac Canadian film about a zombie apocalypse that's caused by white settlerism, and it uses all of the sort of stuff of zombie lore, including back to the Haitian zombie, to sort of position white people as the zombie in the film, If you have blood quantum, you have enough Native American blood, or Native North American blood, I guess, Canadian in this case, you aren't going to become a zombie. And so the film is about sort of trying to reclaim the earth with the earth against this onslaught of white settler colonialism. But anyway, your question was about Haitian zombies. Did you want to talk about Haitian zombies?
There was just like, is there any possibility of seeing our zombies, as I commonly call them, as like on a spectrum with the Haitian zombie, or are they some like you have to make a completely different box for them because they are disconnected, because they are like we gave them through colonialism and through the occupation and through all this violence, but doesn't that, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a film called Zombie Child. It's a French film that is about two girls that there's a white French girl that has a friend who is Haitian, and her grandfather was a zombie voodoo practitioner. And so she, through her mother still practicing it, is able to turn that girl into a zombie, but she's then possessed by sort of an evil trickster being of Haitian descent. Or Haitian lore, Baron Samedi. And so that's a film that's about it's about post-colonialism. It's about sort of taking from her friend in the film and using her to overcome like these petty grievances that she has in life. She broke up with her boyfriend, or made up a boyfriend, or had a crush on somebody, it didn't work out, or something like that, I can't remember. But she uses the Haitian friend to try to get some kind of revenge, or try to take something back from that in this weird ceremony that they do. So there are examples of like things exploring the Haitian zombies still. That's a pretty recent film, but.
Well, one thing that I was interested in that was kind of present in most of the papers was this this kind of meta presentation of the zombific process, right? Where we're, especially this idea of American authors who are like zombifying British texts to take advantage, capitalistically speaking, and all that kind of stuff's going on. And so I was also thinking about, in our efforts to update the zombie for our own creative purposes, are we not complicit in the process of zombification itself? And so just kind of thinking about it on a metatextual level, I wondered if anybody had anything to add to their own arguments in that vein.
Okay, so some people see this reviving, using these texts and adding zombies, werewolves, mummies as we're renewing interest in old classics, but at the same time we are appropriating. But then again, the whole movie Zombie was appropriated from the Haitian voodoo spirituality. So I think it makes sense in that, but at the same time I have thoughts about whether or not that's a good thing, that we're just continuing the process.
Sure. That's a great question. I think that I'm sticking within within O'Hara's play, which I find frankly maybe a little irresponsible in its invocation of the in the way it uses the zombie, particularly in this new world order and its examination of American identity. I think that that you could argue that it is very complicit in it. I was attracted to it because the play does offer a very different perspective on zombies in the sense that they, as creatures of agency, as creatures that are, or as powerful beings. I think that if I were serving as a dramaturg for this play, I would have had more questions about, are we doing our best to to represent this in a play that the only black just to evoke race, the only black character is one of the ones that is brutally murdered on stage. So, yeah. No. Anybody else?
Everything, I feel ridiculously answering you because everything I tell you, you will already know. So I'm like, this is just a performance. I don't think that The Walking Dead is appropriating it more than any Romero film would. They're just playing in the same field, and I mean, obviously, we know, Sarah Juliet Laura has made the argument that you can only call a zombie if it's connected to slavery, because that's where the figure stems from. So if you take slavery out of the picture, it's no longer zombie. Obviously, that makes a lot of zombie texts not about zombies. But there is an argument to be made, and there are heated discussions in zombie research about, what's allowed, what do we call a zombie? There's the distinction between a zombie with 2 eyes and the typical American spelling. If we go into the indigenous field, blood quantum, I love blood quantum. I think it's amazing, but like that's not Haitian. So I don't know what to tell you.
It reminds me of Jameson said that we sort of push off utopia by creating fictional utopias. So it sort of gives us this weird little tiny bit of catharsis that allows us to not enact some kind of necessary change. And so I always wonder that, thinking about zombies and doing zombie writing, watching zombie films, etc., and how much of the stuff that we're doing, the creation, the talking about it in these forums, things like that, is complicit in continuing some kind of zombification process that we're undergoing. And I don't have an answer for you either, Kyle, but what do you think? Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too.
It's not really a question. Well, maybe it is a question. So I'm from DC too, and I saw a very late rehearsal of Zombie, and right. So and I like O'Hara a lot. I've had some chats with him, and I teach Booty Candy, and I like 4 friends in the show. So I was kind of just in the building, so I snuck in and maybe caught 45 minutes of it, and I'm like, and my initial thought was, this will never ever get another production. So has it? And I was sitting here scrounging the internet, and I don't see that it ever got another production. And I talked to Howard like maybe 8 years ago about it, and you did or did not see it? I did not see it. Oh, okay. No, yeah. I think your characterizations are really interesting. It was, high satire, high concept that you sort of got in the first 10 minutes, and then are we just throwing shit at a wall about zombies for 2 hours and 20 minutes? And then when the really bad reviews came out, I didn't go back to see it. So you haven't heard of another production either?
I could not find another one, none. And it was published 2 years ago, it looks like. So yeah, I don't know exactly what happened. I think there was this power structure that was really interesting to me when especially as somebody who had just been writing about immersive horror and how cinema's mise-en-scène affects immersive horror, and how we owe more about cinema mise-en-scène to that than theater mise-en-scène. But this play has a lot of shit thrown at the wall. I mean, I didn't even get into the clones at all, and there's a lot of stuff in here, and there's a lot of stuff that just gets like you left after 45 minutes. A lot of those loops don't get. I don't know if you've read the play, they don't get closed back in at all. So there's a lot of like dangling participles that in the play. But yeah, I could not find another single production, and I read the Peter Marx's review in the Washington Post, which was just slam the thing. There were some more like those like DC Metro Arts and stuff like that. They were a little kinder to it, as they are off to do, but yeah, I could that review. If you ever want to go back and read it, that's the kind of review that's meant to like end a play. So yeah, that's cool that you actually. That is such a wild coincidence. So thank you.
All right, we are out of time, so let's
Can I
think
ask a question that doesn't need an answer?
Oh, yeah.
Did anybody else, when the zombie with the honey in it pulled up? I wasn't disgusted. Does anybody else want to know what the honey tastes like? Oh, it's wasps. Lame. It should have been honeybees.
All right, if anyone has a pipeline to zombie honey, send it Zebadiah's way. Let's thank our panelists.